My mother stood in the villa I secretly owned, handing my sister's children toys worth $500 while refusing to even touch my adopted newborn. She announced that she saved the best for her real family because blood was all that mattered. As I watched her swipe the credit card, I paid off every month. I realized she had no idea that her definition of family was about to cost her the roof over her head. My name is Iris Silverton, and for most of my 32 years on this earth, I believed that love was a transaction. If I was successful enough, if I was generous enough, if I was quiet enough, I could purchase the affection of the woman who gave birth to me. I am the lead architect at Vanguard Horizons, a firm known for designing structures that can withstand earthquakes, hurricanes, and the slow erosion of time. I spend my days calculating loads and stresses, finding the breaking points of steel and glass before they happen. It is ironic, then, that I failed to see the structural fatigue in my own family until the entire roof came crashing down on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The location was the family villa overlooking Lake Union, a sprawling property with cedar siding and floor-to-ceiling windows that captured the gray mood of the Pacific Northwest perfectly. I had parked my modest sedan behind my mother's brand-new luxury SUV, a vehicle I knew she could not afford on her own pension. I took a deep breath, the cold, damp air filling my lungs, and unbuckled the car seat in the back. Inside slept Leo. He was 3 months old, a bundle of soft cotton and innocence that I had fought for 5 agonizing years to bring into my life. The fertility treatments, the hormone injections that made me feel like a stranger in my own skin, the heartbreak of negative tests, and finally, the arduous, intrusive process of adoption. He was not of my body, but he was of my soul. Today was supposed to be his introduction to the family. I had curated this moment in my head 1,000 times. I imagined my mother, Beatrice, tearing up as she saw him. I imagined my sister, Chloe, perhaps offering a hand-me-down blanket from her own children, a gesture of maternal solidarity. I walked up the flagstone path, shielding Leo from the drizzle with my coat. The door was unlocked. I stepped inside, and the warmth of the house hit me. Carrying the scent of expensive vanilla candles and roasted garlic, the living room was staged like a magazine spread. My mother always cared more about how things looked than how they felt. Beatrice was standing by the fireplace, holding a glass of Chardonnay. She wore a cashmere sweater that cost more than my first car, her hair coiffed into a stiff, perfect helmet of blonde. My sister, Chloe, was sprawled on the oversized beige sectional, laughing at something on her phone while her 2 children, Noah and Emma, ran circles around the coffee table. "I'm here," I announced, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. Beatrice looked up. Her eyes scanned me, checking my outfit, my hair, and my shoes, before finally landing on the carrier in my arms. There was no surge of emotion. There was no rush to greet me. She just took a sip of her wine and smiled that tight, practiced smile she used for neighbors she disliked. "You are late, Iris," she said. "We almost started lunch without you. Chloe has to get the kids to piano lessons by 4. Traffic was bad on the I-5, I said, stepping further into the room. And getting Leo ready takes a bit of time. At the mention of his name, the room seemed to absorb the sound without reflecting it. Chloe did not look up from her phone. Beatrice turned to adjust a vase of hydrangeas on the mantel. It was as if I had said, I brought a bag of groceries rather than a new grandson. I set the carrier down gently on the ottoman. Leo stirred, his tiny fists unclamping as he let out a soft yawn. He was beautiful. He had wide, curious eyes and a tuft of dark hair that stuck up in the back no matter how much I smoothed it down. "He's awake," I said, trying to inject enthusiasm into the dead air. "Mom, Chloe, come see him. He has been smiling all morning." Chloe finally pocketed her phone and leaned back. Crossing her arms, she looked at Leo with the detached curiosity one might offer a stray cat. "He is small," she observed flatly. "Noah was way bigger at 3 months. But then again, Noah has the Silverton build, strong genes." "He is a healthy weight, Chloe," I said, keeping my tone even. I am just saying, Chloe continued, flipping her hair over her shoulder. It is funny how genetics work. Emma has mom's nose, and Noah has dad's chin. It is so special to see the family reflected in them. You know? Like they are actually part of the history here. The insult was wrapped in cotton. But it hit its mark. She was marking her territory, drawing a circle around herself, her children, and our mother, and pointing out that Leo and I stood outside of it. History is what you make it, I replied, lifting Leo out of the carrier. He felt warm and solid against my chest, a grounding weight. I walked over to Beatrice. Mom, do you want to hold him? He's really calm right now. I held my son out toward his grandmother. It was a peace offering. It was a plea. I was asking her to validate him, to validate me as a mother. Beatrice took a visible step back. Her back pressed against the marble of the fireplace. Her expression was not one of joy, but of mild revulsion, the way someone looks at a railing on a public bus. Oh, no, Iris, I better not, she said, waving her hand in front of her face. Why not? I asked. Your hands are clean. It is not that, she said, lowering her voice to a stage whisper, as if Leo could understand her cruelty. It is just that, well, we do not know where he comes from. Do you, really know? The agency gives you paperwork, but you do not know the medical history. You do not know what kind of background those people had. I cannot risk catching some strange disease or having him pass something to Noah and Emma. We have to be careful. The room went silent. The crackle of the fireplace sounded like gunshots. I stood frozen. Strange disease. Those people. She spoke about my son as if he were a contaminated object, a biological hazard brought into her pristine sanctuary. My background in architecture taught me that every material has a limit. A point of stress where it snaps. I felt something snap inside my chest. He has a clean bill of health from the pediatrician. Mom, I said, my voice trembling slightly. He is your grandson. He is your adopted child. Iris, she corrected me, her tone breezy, as if clarifying a minor clerical error. And that is wonderful for you. Really. But let us not force things. Chloe's kids are sensitive. Before I could respond, before I could scream or cry or flip the table, Beatrice clapped her hands together, changing the subject with whiplash speed. Anyway, enough of that. We have a surprise. She beamed, the warmth returning to her face instantly as she turned toward Chloe's children. Who wants to see what Grandma got them for being such good students? Noah and Emma shrieked with delight. Beatrice moved to the corner of the room, behind the velvet armchair, and pulled out 2 massive boxes wrapped in gold foil with thick satin ribbons. They were enormous. Even from where I stood, I recognized the branding. They were collector edition electric train sets, the kind with real steam and intricate tracks, imported from Germany. She handed one to Noah and one to Emma. The kids tore into the paper like wild animals. Wow, Noah yelled. This is the heavy hauler set. Daddy said this costs $500. Grandma, Chloe squealed, clapping her hands. You are insane. These are way too expensive. Beatrice waved her hand dismissively, looking at the children with an adoration she had never shown me. Oh, hush. Nothing is too expensive for my babies. I wanted to get them something that lasts, something of quality. She turned to look at me, and for a second, I thought she might have a small rattle or a onesie for Leo hidden behind her back, but her hands were empty. She locked eyes with me, her gaze steady and challenging. I have to spend my money where it counts. Iris, she said, I have to provide for the future of this family. I have to prioritize the real family, the bloodline. That is just nature. You understand, right? Real family. The words hung in the air, toxic and heavy. She had said it. She had finally said the quiet part out loud. In her eyes, Leo was a prop, and I was merely a spectator to the main event, which was the glorification of Chloe and her biological offspring. I looked down at Leo. He was asleep against my shoulder, blissfully unaware that his grandmother had just disowned him before he could even speak. I felt a fierce, protective heat rise in my belly. I did not want to cry. Crying was for the weak, and I was done being the weak daughter begging for scraps. My eyes drifted to the pile of torn wrapping paper on the floor. Lying face up on the carpet was the receipt from the toy store, attached to the warranty card. It must have fallen out of the bag. The bold black numbers confirmed Noah's estimate. Each set was $540. The total was over $1,000. But it was not the total that made my blood run cold. It was the last 4 digits of the card number printed at the bottom of the slip. 3098. I knew those numbers. I typed them into my browser every month. I knew them because I was the one who paid the bill. It was my secondary American Express card, the one I had given Beatrice 5 years ago for emergencies, when she claimed her pension check was late and she needed medication, the one she swore she only used for groceries and the occasional doctor's copay. I stood there, processing the scene with the cold, analytical detachment of my profession. I looked at the chandelier above the dining table. I had paid for that electrical work 2 years ago. I looked at the hardwood floors. I had paid for the refinishing when Chloe said the carpets were giving Noah allergies. I looked at the toy train in Noah's hand. I had paid for the very instrument of my own son's exclusion. The villa was not a home. It was a parasitic organism, and I was the host. "Iris?" Chloe asked, noticing my silence. "Are you okay? You look pale. Do not tell me you are sick." "Mom is right. You should not be around the kids if you are carrying something." I shifted Leo to my other arm. I looked at Beatrice, who was busy helping Emma set up the tracks on the rug. She looked happy. She looked rich. She looked entirely unburdened by conscience. "I am fine," I said. My voice was steady. It sounded like steel cooling. "I just realized I forgot something." "Oh," Beatrice glanced up. "Well, we are eating in 20 minutes. Do not take long." "I won't," I said. I did not scream. I did not demand the receipt. I did not cause a scene that would give them the satisfaction of calling me hysterical or hormonal. I simply turned around and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Chloe called out, half annoyed. "We have not even cut the cake." "I have to go," I said, opening the heavy oak door. The rain was coming down harder now, a gray curtain separating the warmth of the villa from the reality of the world. "Iris, do not be dramatic." Beatrice shouted after me, her voice losing its sweetness. "You are ruining the mood." I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me. The click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It sounded like a period at the end of a very long, very bad sentence. I walked to my car, shielding Leo, and strapped him back into his seat. My hands were shaking, not from sorrow, but from adrenaline. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the house through the rain-slicked windshield. I saw the golden glow of the windows. I saw the silhouette of my mother laughing. She thought she had put me in my place. She thought she had established the hierarchy once and for all. Real family gets the gold. The architect and her stray baby get the cold shoulder. I pulled my phone from my purse and opened my banking app. I navigated to the credit card section. Pending transaction, $1,080. Toy World. I took a screenshot. Then I opened the Notes app on my phone and started a new list. I typed 2 words at the top. The demolition. My mother refused to hold my son because she feared contamination. She had no idea that she was right to be afraid. But the danger wasn't coming from the baby. It was coming from the woman who had spent a decade building the foundation beneath her feet, and who had just decided to pull the supports. I started the engine. The heater hummed to life. I looked in the rearview mirror at Leo. "Do not worry," I whispered to him. "Grandma wanted a real family. She's going to find out exactly what it costs to keep one." I shifted the car into reverse and backed out of the driveway. As I drove away, leaving the villa behind in the mist, I did not feel like a daughter anymore. I felt like an architect looking at a condemned building, knowing exactly where to place the dynamite. The party was over. The work was just beginning. The silence in my car on the drive back to my apartment was heavy, but it was not empty. It was filled with the ghosts of the last 10 years. A decade of my life that I had unknowingly spent building a throne for a woman who viewed me as nothing more than a serf. My father, Richard, died of a sudden aneurysm when I was 22. He was a man of quiet strength, the kind of person who checked the tire pressure on my car before I drove back to college and tucked extra cash into my coat pocket without saying a word. When he passed, the world felt like it had tilted on its axis, sliding everything I knew into a dark, unnavigable corner, in the chaotic aftermath of the funeral. My mother, Beatrice, had donned the black veil of the grieving widow with theatrical perfection. She told me and my sister, Chloe, that Dad had left a complicated estate, a mess of investments and debts that she would bravely shoulder alone to protect us. I was young, grief-stricken, and just starting my career as a junior architect. I wanted to help. I wanted to be the strong one. When Beatrice asked me to cover the utility bill that first month, because the accounts were frozen, I did it without hesitation. When she asked me to co-sign a loan a year later to maintain the lifestyle Dad wanted for us, I signed. It was a slow creep, a rising tide of requests that eventually became demands, disguised as familial duty. I parked my car in the garage of my modest apartment complex, a stark contrast to the sprawling villa I had just left. I carried Leo upstairs, his sleeping form a warm weight against my chest, as I laid him down in his crib, the nursery light casting long shadows across the room. I looked at his face. I had spent so years convincing myself that if I just worked harder, if I just gave more, if I just proved that I was successful enough to lift the whole family, Beatrice would finally look at me the way she looked at Chloe. Chloe. My sister was 2 years younger than me, but lived as if she were permanently 16. She was the sensitive one, the creative soul who could not be troubled with the mundane realities of holding down a job. Beatrice enabled this helplessness, feeding it like a stray cat until it grew into a tiger that demanded fresh meat daily. I was the hunter. Chloe was the mouth to be fed. I had accepted this dynamic because I thought it was the price of admission to the family unit. I thought that by adopting Leo, by bringing a new life into our circle, I would finally be seen as a mother, as an equal, rather than just the financier. Today had shattered that illusion. Beatrice did not want a grandson from me. She did not want a connection. She wanted the credit card to keep working, and she wanted me to stay in the corner, silent and solvent. I walked into my home office and sat down at my desk. My job at Vanguard Horizons required me to be hyper-vigilant. As a lead architect, I spent my days analyzing blueprints for high-rise structures, looking for the tiniest miscalculations in load-bearing walls or wind resistance. One decimal point in the wrong place could bring a skyscraper down. I was paid a significant salary to be paranoid, to foresee disaster before the ground even shook. Yet, staring at my laptop screen, I realized I had never applied that same rigorous scrutiny to my own mother. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk surface. It was a notification from my bank app, the same one I had opened in the car. Alert credit limit reached on American Express Platinum. Transaction declined at the wine cellar. She was trying to buy vintage wine, an hour after telling me my son was a contamination risk. She was trying to soothe her nerves with a bottle of Pinot Noir that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I opened my laptop and logged into the banking portal. Usually, I just paid the total amount due at the end of the month, glancing at the number but never dissecting it. I told myself I was being a good daughter, that Dad would have wanted me to take care of them. Tonight, however, the good daughter was dead. The auditor had taken her place. I downloaded the statements for the last 5 years and exported them into a spreadsheet. The glowing rows of data reflected in my glasses. I started sorting by category. The numbers were nauseating. There were charges for a luxury spa in Sedona, classified under medical expenses in my mother's verbal reports to me. $4,000 for a weekend of mud baths and chakra alignment, There were airline tickets to Paris and Milan for Chloe and her husband. Mark, booked during months when Chloe claimed they were struggling to put food on the table. There were tuition payments for Noah and Emma's private preschool, listed as household maintenance on the credit card coding. I highlighted the column for Chloe's children. In the last 3 years alone, I had unknowingly paid for their equestrian lessons, their piano tutors, their designer wardrobes, and now, their $500 German train sets. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silent room. I felt physically ill. It was not just the money. I made good money. It was the deception. It was the fact that every time I told Beatrice I was tired, every time I mentioned that work was stressful, she would tell me to push through because family relies on us. She wasn't relying on me. She was harvesting me. A memory surfaced from the depths of my mind, sharp and clear. It was a week before my father died. We were sitting on the porch of the villa, watching the rain disturb the surface of Lake Union. He looked tired, his skin gray, as if he knew his time was short. He had pressed a small, cold object into my hand. "Iris," he had said, his voice raspy, "you are the smart one. You have a head for structure. If anything ever happens, and things get confusing, you go to Liberty Stronghold Bank. I have a box there. Number 402. Do not lose the key." I had nodded, tucking the key into my wallet, thinking he was just being dramatic after he died. Beatrice had been so commanding, so sure of herself, that I had forgotten about the box. I assumed whatever was in there had been handled by the probate lawyers she claimed to have hired. I pulled my wallet out of my purse, buried in the zippered coin pocket. Behind a stack of loyalty cards I never used was the small, tarnished brass key. It felt heavy in my palm, heavier than it should have been. I looked back at the spreadsheet. The total amount I had funneled into my mother's lifestyle over the last 5 years was nearly $500,000. I had delayed buying my own home to support them. I had delayed starting my own family because I thought I could not afford it. I had fought through the expensive adoption process, scraping together every penny, while my mother was using my credit line to fund Chloe's vacations. I picked up my phone again. It was 7 in the evening. But I knew the man I needed to call would still be awake. Arthur Pendleton was not a warm man. He was a shark in a tailored suit, a corporate litigator I had met through Vanguard Horizons when we had a zoning dispute with the city. He was not the family lawyer my mother used, a man named Gerald who always smelled of gin and incompetence. Arthur was expensive, ruthless, and loyal only to the person paying his retainer. "Iris," Arthur's voice came through the speaker after 2 rings, crisp and alert. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Please tell me a building has not collapsed. The building is still standing." "Arthur," I said, my voice sounding more steady than I felt. "But the foundation is rotting. I need a favor, a personal one. I will pay your full hourly rate." "I am listening," he said. "I need you to pull the property records for my mother's house, the villa on Lake Union. I need to know exactly whose name is on the deed, and I need to know if there are any liens against it." "The Lake Union property." Arthur paused, the sound of a keyboard clacking in the background. "I can access the county assessor's database from here. Give me 2 minutes." I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked at the baby monitor on my desk. Leo was shifting in his sleep. I was doing this for him. I could not be the mother he needed if I was being bled dry by the mother I had. "Iris," Arthur's voice returned, but the professional detachment was gone, replaced by a note of confusion. "Are you sure about the address 105? Lakeview Drive?" "Yes," I said. "That is the one. My father left it to my mother 10 years ago." "No," Arthur said slowly. "He did not." The air in my office seemed to vanish. "What do you mean?" "I am looking at the chain of title right now," Arthur said, his voice precise. "The deed was transferred 10 years ago, immediately upon your father's death. Per the instructions of a living trust, the property is not in the name of Beatrice Silverton." "Then who owns it?" I whispered, though I think a part of me already knew the answer. You do, Arthur said. Iris Silverton, you are the sole owner of the estate. Your mother is listed as having a life estate with specific conditions, but the fee simple title belongs to you. You have owned that house since you were 22. I dropped the pen I was holding. It rolled across the desk and fell onto the floor with a clatter. Me, I choked out. But Mom told me the house was hers. She told me the mortgage was underwater. She told me I had to pay rent to the estate to help her keep it. Iris, Arthur said, his tone sharpening into something dangerous. If you have been paying rent, you have been paying it to yourself, or rather, you have been paying it to whoever controls the accounts receiving that money. And if she told you the house is hers, she lied. But there is something else. What? I asked, dread coiling in my stomach like a cold snake. There is a second mortgage recorded on the property, Arthur said, taken out 3 years ago, for $200,000. The signature on the loan documents is Iris Silverton. I stared at my hand that had not signed any loan documents 3 years ago. I did not sign that, Arthur, I said. I did not authorize a second mortgage. Then we have a problem, Arthur said. Or rather, Beatrice has a problem, because that is fraud, and given the amount, it is a felony. I closed my eyes. The image of my mother handing that $500 train set to Noah flashed in my mind. She wasn't just spending my money. She was stealing my identity. She was mortgaging my future to buy affection from the daughter she actually loved. What do? I asked. You stop paying, Arthur said. You stop paying for everything, immediately, and then you come to my office tomorrow morning. We are going to audit the entire estate. If she forged your signature on a mortgage, Iris, I guarantee you that is just the tip of the iceberg. Arthur, I said, looking at the brass key from the bank that sat on my desk. I think I have the rest of the iceberg. I have a key to a box at Liberty Stronghold. Bring it, Arthur commanded. And Iris, do not tell her you know. Not yet. If she knows you are onto her, she will destroy evidence. You need to be the architect now. You need to inspect the damage before you start the demolition. I understand, I said. I hung up the phone. The room was quiet again, but the heavy, suffocating feeling was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I was no longer the daughter seeking approval. I was the owner of the house my mother slept in. I was the victim of a crime she thought she had committed perfectly. I looked at the spreadsheet one last time. Every spa treatment, every toy, every tuition payment was a brick in the wall she had built between us. She thought that wall protected her. She thought it kept me out. She was wrong. Walls were my specialty, and I knew exactly how to bring them down. I reached for my laptop and logged into the utility portal for the villa. I did not turn off the power. That would be too obvious. Instead, I removed my credit card from the autopay settings. Then I did the same for the water, the internet, the landscaping service, and the pool maintenance. One by one, I severed the lifelines. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights of Seattle. Somewhere out there, in my house, Beatrice was probably pouring another glass of wine, congratulating herself on putting me in my place. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet was already gone. Tomorrow, I would open the box. Tomorrow, the good daughter would be buried, and the rightful owner would rise. The morning after the disastrous party, the sky over Seattle was the color of a bruised plum. I left Leo with a trusted nanny I had hired through an agency, kissing his forehead with a lingering sense of guilt, and drove straight to the downtown branch of Liberty Stronghold Bank. This was not the branch near my mother's villa, nor was it the one I used for my daily checking. It was an older building, a fortress of limestone and iron that looked like it had been built to withstand the Great Depression. I walked into the lobby, the sound of my heels clicking sharply against the marble floors. The air smelled of floor wax and old money. I requested access to Box 402, presenting the death certificate I had kept in my files and the tarnished brass key my father had slipped into my hand a decade ago. The bank manager? A man with rimless glasses and a suspicion of anyone under the age of 50 verified my identity with agonizing slowness before leading me into the vault. The room was silent, lined with walls of stainless steel drawers. It felt less like a bank and more like a mausoleum. When the manager unlocked the box and slid the long metal drawer out, he stepped back to give me privacy. I stared at the metal lid for a long moment. I was about to open a time capsule from a man who had been dead for 10 years. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no jewelry, no gold bars, just a thick, expansive envelope made of heavy manila paper, sealed with a red wax stamp that had cracked with age. My father had always been dramatic about security. I broke the seal. The first document was a deed, a grant deed, to be precise. I scanned the legal jargon, my eyes darting over the familiar terms of property law. Then I stopped. The breath caught in my throat. The deed clearly stated that upon the death of Richard Silverton, the property at 105 Lakeview Drive was to transfer immediately to Iris Silverton as the sole owner. I read it again. Sole owner. Beneath the deed was a document titled Life Estate Agreement. I pulled it out, my hands trembling. This was the document my mother must have known about, or perhaps she had hidden her copy and prayed I never found mine. The agreement granted Beatrice Silverton the right to reside in the property for the remainder of her natural life, but it came with a stipulation so specific, so cutting, that I could almost hear my father's voice reading it aloud. Condition of tenancy. The life tenant, Beatrice Silverton, shall maintain the property in good standing and shall not permit any other adult children or extended family members to reside on the premises for a period exceeding 14 consecutive days, or more than 30 days in a calendar year. Violation of this clause shall result in the immediate termination of the life estate. Dad knew. Even 10 years ago. He knew. He knew that Chloe was a parasite and that Beatrice was the host. And he had tried to waterproof the ship before he died. He had given me the house to protect it, and he had banned Chloe to save Beatrice from herself. But Beatrice had buried this. She had lied to me, telling me the house was in probate, then in a trust, then in her name. She had convinced me that I had to pay the bills to save the family home, when in reality, I was paying the bills for a house I already owned, supporting a sister who was legally trespassing. I dug deeper into the envelope. There were stock certificates for blue-chip companies, seemingly untouched, and then, at the very bottom, was a printed email correspondence from my father to a trust attorney, dated 2 days before he died. Make sure Iris has the key. It read, Beatrice will give everything to Chloe if we do not lock it down. I need to know Iris is safe. I sat on the cold metal stool in the vault and felt a wave of nausea wash over me. It was not just greed. It was a complete erasure of my father's dying wishes. I gathered the documents, put them in my briefcase, and drove straight to Arthur Pendleton's office. Arthur was waiting for me in a glass-walled conference room that overlooked the Puget Sound. He looked at the documents I slid across the mahogany table. His face unreadable. He spent 10 minutes reading in silence, occasionally adjusting his cufflinks. This changes everything, Arthur said finally. Looking up, you are not just the owner, Iris, you are the landlord, and your mother is a tenant who is currently in breach of lease. It gets worse, I said. Pulling up the file Arthur had sent me the previous night regarding the second mortgage. Compare the signature on this deed to the signature on the mortgage loan documents you found. Arthur pulled up the digital file on his tablet and placed it next to the original deed from the box. The signature on the deed, my signature from when I was 22, was a sharp, angular scrawl. The signature on the mortgage document from 3 years ago was loopy, hesitant, and round. It was my mother's handwriting trying to dress up as mine. She forged your name, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. She took out a $200,000 loan against a house she does not own, pretending to be you. That is grand larceny. That is mortgage fraud. That is 20 years in federal prison. Where did the money go? Arthur, I asked. $200,000 does not just vanish into handbags and wine. Arthur tapped a few keys on his laptop. He had been busy since our call. I had my forensic accountant look into the transfer path of the loan disbursement. It went into a joint account held by Beatrice Silverton and Mark Daniels. Mark, I said, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. Chloe's husband. And from there, Arthur continued, it was transferred to a company called Future Prime Investments. I looked them up. It is a shell company for a high-risk crypto scheme that collapsed 6 months ago. The money is gone. Iris, all of it. I stared out the window at the gray water. My mother had stolen equity from my house, the house my father left me to give $200,000 to her son-in-law so he could gamble it away on internet coins. And when the money ran out, she invited them to move in, defying the one condition my father had set to protect her. I want them out, I said. I want them all out. We can file for eviction immediately, Arthur said. We can file criminal charges for the forgery. But Iris, you need to understand the exposure here. The bank does not know the signature is forged yet. If we prove it is fraud, the loan is invalid. But the bank will still want their money. They will try to foreclose on the lien. We have to be careful. I need proof that Chloe is living there, I said, thinking like an architect, looking for the load-bearing beam. The will says the life estate is void if she lives there, if I prove she is a resident. Mom loses her right to the house immediately. The forgery is the nuclear option, but the lease violation is the eviction trigger. I can recommend a private investigator, Arthur said, sliding a business card across the table. His name is Vance. He is discreet, and he is expensive. I do not care about the cost, I said. I have spent $500,000 supporting people who hate me. I can spend a few thousand to expose them. I met Vance 2 hours later at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill. He was a nondescript man who looked like a retired math teacher, which I assumed was the point. I gave him the address and the photos of Chloe, Mark, and the kids. I need to establish residency, I told him. Not just visiting, living. I will get you trash pulls, mail delivery confirmation, and surveillance of morning and evening routines, Vance said, taking notes in a small black book. If they are sleeping there every night and keeping their toothbrushes there, I will prove it in 48 hours. The next 2 days were a blur of anxiety and rage. I went to work at Vanguard Horizons, reviewing blueprints for a new hospital wing. But my mind was constantly on the feeds Vance was sending me. The evidence came in streams. Photos of Mark taking out the recycling bins in his pajamas on a Wednesday morning. Photos of Chloe picking up the mail letters addressed to her at my mother's address. Photos of the school bus dropping Noah and Emma off at the villa's gate every afternoon. Vance even managed to get a shot through the kitchen window of the entire family eating dinner, with Mark sitting at the head of the table, my father's table, like he owned the place. They weren't guests. They had colonized the house. On Friday afternoon, I sat in Arthur's office again. The report from Vance was thick and damning. We had them on the life estate violation. We had the forgery evidence in our back pocket. So, Arthur said, leaning back in his leather chair, do we serve them now? The sheriff can be there by Monday. I looked at the photos. I looked at the picture of Beatrice laughing as she poured wine for Mark. She looked so comfortable. She looked so safe in the fortress of lies she had built. If I evicted them now, they would play the victim. They would scream to the extended family that I was throwing a grandmother and grandchildren onto the street. They would gaslight everyone into thinking I was the monster. No, I said slowly. Not yet. If I strike now, they will claim it is a misunderstanding. They will say they were just visiting for a few weeks. I need them to admit it. I need them to dig the hole so deep they can never climb out. What do you have in mind? Arthur asked. I'm going to cut off the money, I said. All of it. Today, I am going to tell them that I am broke. That will provoke a reaction, Arthur warned. Desperate people do dangerous things. I am counting on it, I replied. Mom stole $200,000 because she thought I would never check. If she thinks the cash cow is dying, she will try to butcher it to get the last cuts of meat. I want to see how far she will go. I drove home and prepared myself. I sat on my sofa, Leo playing with a soft block at my feet, and picked up my phone. I dialed Beatrice. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight. She was likely already seeing the declined transactions on the credit card I had canceled. "Iris," she said, dispensing with pleasantries. "There is something wrong with the American Express. I tried to order catering for Sunday brunch, and it was declined. You need to fix it." "I can't. Mom," I said, injecting a tremor of panic into my voice. It was not hard to fake. My adrenaline was spiking. "What do you mean? You can't," she snapped. I can't," I said. "I got called into HR today. My salary is being cut. The project I was leading got put on hold. And with the adoption expenses for Leo, Mom, I am tapped out. I can't pay the credit card bill this month. I might not be able to pay the mortgage either." There was a silence on the other end of the line, a long, cold silence. A normal mother would have asked if I was okay. A normal mother would have offered to help, even if she couldn't. "You are lying," Beatrice said, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You are the lead architect. You make plenty of money. It is gone." "Mom," I lied. "I have to prioritize Leo. I have to cut back. I am sorry. But you and Chloe are going to have to cover the expenses for the house for a while. I just can't do it. We can't cover the house." "Iris," she shouted, her composure cracking. "You know we can't. Mark is in between opportunities right now. Chloe needs help with the kids. You have a responsibility to us." "My responsibility is to my son," I said, using the line I knew would trigger her the most. "The bank said my accounts are overdrawn. I have to go. Mom, I have to figure this out." I hung up before she could scream at me again. I stared at the phone. I knew exactly what would happen next. By cutting off the flow of money, I had created a vacuum. Beatrice and Mark were sitting in a house they couldn't afford, with a mortgage fraud hanging over their heads that they thought was still a secret, and a lifestyle they refused to abandon. They would panic, and in their panic, they would try to find a new source of funds. Since they had already used my name to steal from a bank, there was only one asset left to plunder: the house itself. I texted Arthur. "The bait is in the water." I looked down at Leo. He giggled, unaware that his mother had just started a war. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. For 10 years, I had been the victim. Today, for the first time, I was the hunter. They thought they were living in a mansion, but I knew the truth. They were living in a trap, and I had just closed the door. The fallout from my declaration of financial ruin was immediate and nuclear. If I had dropped a bomb on the villa, the destruction would have been cleaner. Instead, I had to listen to the slow, agonizing shriek of entitlement being ripped away from the host. For the first 24 hours, Beatrice cycled through the stages of grief with the speed of a hummingbird. First came denial. She called me back 5 minutes after I hung up, her voice light and airy, pretending the previous conversation had been a bad connection or a tasteless joke. "Iris, darling," she breezed. "I know you are stressed, but the landscapers are here, and the card was declined again. Just fix it." "Okay, we can talk about your little mood later." "It is not a mood, Mom," I said, putting my phone on speaker so I could continue feeding Leo his bottle. "The money is gone. The card is canceled. You need to send the landscapers home." Then came anger. She screamed that I was ungrateful, that I was abandoning her in her old age, that my father would be ashamed of me. She listed every sacrifice she had ever made, from the stretch marks I supposedly caused to the vacations she skipped in 1998. But it was Chloe's phone call the next morning that truly peeled back the skin of our relationship to reveal the rot underneath. "You are a selfish bitch," my sister spat the moment I answered. There was no hello, just pure, distilled venom. "Hello to you too. Chloe," I said, staring at the blueprints for a suspension bridge on my monitor. "Do not get sarcastic with me," she snapped. "Mom is a wreck. She has been crying all night. How could you do this to us? Noah has tuition due next week, $5,000. Iris, if we do not pay." they lose their spots. Do you want your nephew to get kicked out of school? I cannot pay what I do not have, Chloe, I lied calmly. And maybe public school is not so bad. I went to public school. My children are not going to public school with the general population, she shrieked. They are gifted. They deserve the best. But you would not understand that, would you? You do not have real kids. You just have that project you picked up. I gripped the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turned white. Excuse me. You heard me, Chloe said, her voice dripping with disdain. You are cutting off your actual flesh and blood to save money for a stranger. That baby is not family. Iris, he is a prop you bought because you could not do the one thing a woman is supposed to do. And now you are punishing Noah and Emma because you are jealous. The cruelty was breathtaking. It was a precision strike aimed at my deepest insecurity, but instead of breaking me, it calcified my resolve. I am hanging up now, Chloe, I said. Good luck with the tuition. I disconnected the call and sat in the silence of my office. They had crossed the line from parasitic to predatory. Later that afternoon, Beatrice called again. Her tone had shifted from rage to a wheedling, pathetic desperation. She wanted to negotiate. Iris, she sniffled. I understand if things are tight. I do, but we have options. I was talking to a gentleman today, a Mr. Ross. He says the lower garden, the one near the lake access, is very valuable. If we just subdivided that lot and sold it, we could get enough cash to tide us over until you are back on your feet. My ears perked up. The lower garden was part of the property I owned. She had no legal right to sell a single blade of grass. Yet she was already soliciting offers. Mom, I said, keeping my voice trembling and weak. I do not know. That sounds complicated. It is simple, honey, she soothed, sensing weakness. Mr. Ross handles everything. We just need to sign some papers. But I am worried about you. Iris, you sound so paranoid, so anxious. I think the stress of the baby is getting to you. You are not thinking clearly. Maybe you are right, I said, laying the trap. I feel so overwhelmed. I'm scared about everything. The money, the safety. I even feel like the villa isn't safe. There have been break-ins in the neighborhood. Break-ins? Beatrice asked, her voice spiking with fear. Yes, I lied. That is actually why I called. I paid for a high-end security system months ago. Before the money ran out, the technicians are finally available to install it tomorrow. I already paid for it, so we might as well use it. It will make me feel better knowing you and Chloe are safe. Oh, Beatrice said, her greed warring with her suspicion. Greed won. A free security system was still a freebie. Well, if it is already paid for, I suppose that is fine, but we need to talk about the garden. Iris, we can talk about it tomorrow, I said. I will come over with the technicians. The next morning, I arrived at the villa with a van from a private security firm. The technician, a man named Davin who worked exclusively for high-net-worth clients and understood the meaning of discretion, knew exactly what I wanted. Internal and external, I had told him. I want audio in the living room and the study, and I want the feeds accessible only by me. While Davin drilled holes and ran wires, Beatrice hovered over me, offering me tea in a chipped mug while keeping the good china behind the glass cabinet. Chloe refused to come out of her room, but I could hear her yelling at Mark about money. This system is top of the line, I told Beatrice, pointing to the sleek black cameras mounted in the corners of the ceiling. It records everything to the cloud, so if anyone tries to break in, we will know. Good, Beatrice said, smoothing her skirt. Now, about Mr. Ross. I have to go. Mom, I said, checking my watch. I have a job interview. Since my salary was cut, I need to find a second job. I left them there, feeling like a spider walking away from a freshly spun web. That evening, I sat in my home office, the glow of my 3 monitors illuminating the dark room. Leo was asleep in his crib, on the center screen. The live feed from the villa was crisp and clear in 4K resolution. At 7 o'clock, the doorbell at the villa rang. I watched as Beatrice opened the door. A man stepped in. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny, and his smile showed too many teeth. He carried a leather briefcase that looked like a prop from a bad lawyer movie. "Mr. Ross?" Beatrice cooed. "Thank you for coming so late. For a property like this, Beatrice, I would come at midnight," Ross said. His voice was oily, booming through the high-quality microphones I had installed. They walked into the living room. Chloe and Mark joined them. They sat around the coffee table, the same table where I had counted the people at the brunch, and Ross opened his briefcase. "So," Ross started, pulling out a stack of documents, "I have looked at the comps. If we carve out the half-acre by the water, we are looking at $800,000. Quick sale to a developer I know. He pays cash. No questions." $800,000, Mark whistled, his eyes wide. "That solves everything. There is just the issue of the title," Ross said, tapping a pen against his chin. "The records show the house is in a trust. Correct or transferred?" "It is complicated," Beatrice said, waving her hand. "My late husband set up some silly paperwork, but I am the executor. I make the decisions. The title is actually in your daughter's name." "Beatrice," Ross said, his voice dropping. "I checked the county records this morning. Iris Silverton." My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. The moment of truth. "Iris is a mess," Chloe chimed in, leaning forward. "She is having a mental breakdown. She just lost her job. She adopted this random baby, and she is completely unstable. She is not capable of making decisions right now." "That is where this comes in," Ross said, sliding a thick document across the table. "This is a durable power of attorney. It grants you, Beatrice, full control over Iris's financial and legal assets due to her incapacitation." I stopped breathing. They were not just trying to sell the land. They were trying to take me over. "Incapacitation?" Beatrice asked, picking up the paper. "We get a doctor to sign off that she is suffering from severe postpartum psychosis," Chloe said quickly, as if she had rehearsed it. "Or just severe stress-induced breakdown. She told Mom yesterday she was scared and paranoid. She is hallucinating break-ins. We use that. We get the signature. We declare her unfit, and Mom takes control of the assets to protect her. And once you have power of attorney," Ross grinned, "you can sign the deed transfer for the land sale yourself. Iris does not even have to know until the check clears." "And what happens to Iris?" Mark asked, though he didn't sound concerned, just curious. "We put her in a facility for a bit," Beatrice said thoughtfully, staring at the document. "Just until she calms down. A nice place, state-funded, if the money is tight, and the baby—" The baby goes back to the agency," Chloe said cold-bloodedly. "Or foster care. It does not matter. He is not family." I felt a cold rage settle in my bones, a sensation so intense it felt like I had swallowed liquid nitrogen. They were planning to institutionalize me. They were planning to take my son and throw him back into the system just so they could sell my garden and buy designer handbags. Beatrice picked up a pen. She looked at the document, then at the camera, unaware that I was looking right back at her. "It is for her own good," Beatrice sighed. "The ultimate lie of the abuser. She is not herself. She has become so stingy, so mean. This is what Richard would have wanted. He wanted me to be taken care of." "She is useless to us right now," Ross said, pushing for the close. Beatrice looked at Ross, her face hardening into a mask of pure calculation. "You are right," she said. "The girl used to be useful. But honestly, Iris is just an ATM machine. And now that she has that baby, the machine is broken. If she won't give us the cash, we have to dismantle the machine to get it." "They are real family," Chloe muttered, echoing the sentiment from the party. "We have to survive." "So," Ross said, "do we have a deal?" "Draw up the medical papers," Beatrice said. I know a doctor who owes me a favor from the country club. I will get him to certify that she is mentally unhinged. We will get this signed by Monday. I hit the record button on my screen, saving the clip to 3 different cloud servers and a hard drive. Dismantle the machine, I whispered to the empty room. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights blurred through the rain. They thought I was broken. They thought I was a crumbling structure they could condemn and demolish for scrap parts. But they had forgotten one thing about machines. Some of them are not built to dispense cash. Some of them are built to crush anything that gets in their way. I picked up my phone and called Arthur. It was 10 o'clock at night, but I knew he would answer. Iris, he asked, his voice groggy. Do not sleep. Arthur, I said. I have the footage. They are planning to falsify medical records to obtain a power of attorney. They are conspiring to commit fraud, kidnapping, and unlawful imprisonment. Send it to me, Arthur said, the sleep vanishing from his tone instantly. Send it all. I am sending it, I said. And Arthur. Prepare the eviction notice, but not just a notice. I want a show. I want the sheriff. I want the locks changed. And I want it to happen while they are still sitting at that table planning my funeral. I can have the writ of execution ready by Tuesday, Arthur said. Make it Monday, I commanded. They want to say I am crazy fine. Let's show them exactly how crazy I can get when someone threatens my son. I looked back at the screen. Beatrice was pouring champagne for Ross. They were toasting to their victory. They were toasting to the destruction of my life. I walked over to the monitor and placed my hand on the screen, covering my mother's smiling face. Enjoy the champagne, Mom, I said softly. It is the last thing you will ever taste in my house. The summons to the family meeting arrived via a text message from my mother on Sunday morning. It was brief, devoid of emojis, and carried the heavy, suffocating weight of a subpoena. We need to talk. Come to the villa at 2. It is about your future. I parked my car on the street, leaving the driveway clear. A subtle psychological distance I was beginning to enforce. I had left Leah with the nanny, a woman named Mrs. Higgins who was built like a tank and had sworn to me that no one, not even the Pope, would get through the front door while I was gone. Walking up the path to the house I legally owned, I felt like an actress stepping onto a stage. The script called for a crumbling, overwhelmed single mother teetering on the edge of a breakdown. I adjusted my posture, slumping my shoulders slightly, and let my hair hang loose and unkempt around my face. I checked my phone one last time to ensure the recording app was running in the background. Then opened the front door. The living room had been rearranged since the party. The coffee table was cleared of magazines and coasters. Replaced by a pitcher of water and a neat stack of documents, Beatrice sat in her favorite armchair, wearing black, as if she were mourning the daughter she was about to betray. Chloe and Mark sat together on the sofa, holding hands in a display of unity that looked as fragile as it was staged. And then there was the stranger. Sitting in the wingback chair was a man I had never met, though he looked vaguely familiar, like someone I might have seen in the background of a frat party photo on Mark's Facebook page. He wore a navy suit that was slightly too large in the shoulders, and his tie was a shade of yellow that clashed violently with the understated decor of the room. Iris, Beatrice said, her voice dripping with a synthetic sweetness that made my teeth ache. Thank you for coming. Please, sit down. I took the empty chair opposite them. Who is this? I asked, keeping my voice small and tremulous. This is Mr. Sterling, Chloe said quickly. He is a family mediator and legal consultant. Mark knows him. We asked him to be here to help us navigate this difficult time. Mr. Sterling, I repeated. I looked at his hands. No wedding ring, but a tan line where one used to be. His fingernails were bitten down to the quick. I did not know we needed a mediator. We are just worried about you. Iris. Mr. Sterling said. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice used to sell extended car warranties. Your mother and sister have expressed deep concern regarding your current mental state and your financial stability. I am fine, I lied, letting my voice crack. I am just tired. Leo cries a lot, and losing the money, it is hard. Of course it is, Beatrice cooed. And that is why we want to help. We cannot sit by and watch you drown. Iris, we are family. And because we are family, we have come up with a solution to protect you, and to protect that poor baby. Mr. Sterling slid the stack of papers across the table toward me. The title at the top was bold and authoritative, Voluntary Asset Management and Guardianship Agreement. What is this? I asked. Picking it up, my hands shook, partly from performance, partly from the sheer audacity of what I was reading. It is a temporary measure. Mr. Sterling explained. It grants your mother, Beatrice, the authority to manage your remaining assets, the house, your retirement accounts, your banking to ensure bills are paid, and nothing is squandered while you recover from your episode. It also designates her as the primary decision-maker for the welfare of the child. Leo, should you become unable to care for him, I scanned the clauses. It wasn't temporary. The word irrevocable appeared 3 times in the fine print. They weren't just asking for the keys to the car. They were asking for the title, the engine, and the right to run me over with it. You want me to sign over everything? I whispered. We want you to let us carry the burden. Mark piped up. It was the first time he had spoken. He looked sweaty, his eyes darting around the room. You said yourself you are broke. Iris, you are overwhelmed. Let Beatrice handle the logistics. She is good with money. I almost laughed out loud. Beatrice was good with money the way a termite is good with wood. I do not know, I stammered, rubbing my temples. My head hurts. I did not expect this. It is a lot of legal language. It is standard boilerplate, Mr. Sterling assured me, clicking a pen and placing it next to the paper. Just sign it, Iris. Then you can go home and sleep. We will handle the rest. I need a minute, I said, standing up abruptly. I feel sick. I need to use the restroom. Iris, sit down, Chloe snapped, her patience fraying. Let her go. Chloe, Beatrice said soothingly. She is processing. Go wash your face. Honey, we will be right here. I walked down the hallway to the powder room. Closing the door behind me and locking it, I turned on the faucet to create a sound barrier, then immediately pulled out my phone. I opened the app connected to the cameras I had installed with Davin just days ago. The feed from the living room popped up in high definition. I put in my earbuds. On the tiny screen, the dynamic in the living room shifted instantly the moment I left. The concerned family vanished, replaced by a group of conspirators huddled over a map of a bank heist. Do you think she bought it? Mark asked, loosening his tie. She looks like a wreck. She is weak, Chloe scoffed. She always caves. Did you see her shoes scuffed? She really is out of money. Then I saw Beatrice do something that made my blood run cold. She pulled a piece of paper from her purse, not the agreement they had shown me, but a different document. It looked like a deed transfer. She placed it on top of the glass table, then pulled a second sheet of paper out, an old birthday card I had written to her years ago. I have been practicing, Beatrice said. She picked up the pen, on the camera feed. I zoomed in. She was tracing the signature from my old card onto the deed transfer. Her hand was steady, practiced. She had done this before. This was how she had secured the second mortgage. Make it look shaky, Mr. Sterling, whose real name I suspected was probably Trent or Chad, advised. If she is supposed to be stressed, the signature should reflect that. Don't tell me how to forge my own daughter's signature, Beatrice snapped. I have been signing her name on school permission slips and checks since she was 12. Mark leaned in, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. Just get it done, Beatrice. The loan sharks called me again this morning. They said if we do not have the $50,000 by Friday, they are going to start breaking things. And they did not mean furniture. They meant my legs. Shut up, Mark, Chloe hissed. We will get the money. Once she signs the power of attorney, we sell the garden to Ross immediately. His cash buyer is ready. That is $800,000. We pay off your debt. We pay the mortgage arrears, and we still have plenty left over. And the baby? Mark asked. Foster care, Beatrice said, not even looking up from her forgery. Or we just leave him at a fire station. I do not care. He is an expense we cannot afford. I stared at the phone screen, clutching the marble countertop of the vanity. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. Mark was in debt to loan sharks. That was the catalyst. They had burned through the $200,000 from the fraudulent mortgage, and now they were desperate. Desperate enough to commit more fraud. Desperate enough to traffic my son into the system. I watched Beatrice finish the signature. She held it up to the light, admiring her handiwork. Perfect, she said. Now we just need her to sign the main agreement so we have legal cover. Then we can backdate this deed and say she signed it last week. I turned off the faucet. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the scared, overwhelmed Iris they thought was in the bathroom. She was a calm, cold instrument of retribution. I dried my hands. I walked back out into the hallway. When I re-entered the living room, Beatrice quickly slid the forged deed under the stack of papers. She folded her hands and smiled. "Feeling better, sweetie?" she asked. I walked to the table but did not sit down. I stood behind the empty chair, gripping the back of it like a podium. "I read the document again," I said. My voice was no longer trembling. It was flat. Clause 4. It gives you the right to liquidate assets to cover family debts. "Just a formality, Mr. Sterling said quickly. "Mark," I said, turning my gaze to my brother-in-law. "You look sweating. Is it hot in here or are you worried about something specific, like a deadline?" Mark paled. I do not know what you are talking about. I cannot sign this today," I said firmly. The air in the room seemed to vanish. Beatrice's smile dropped like a stone. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice turning sharp. "We are trying to help you." "It is a big decision," I said. "I need 24 hours. I want to have a friend look at it, just to be sure." "A friend?" Chloe stood up. "You do not have friends, Iris. You have work colleagues who tolerate you. Just sign the damn paper." "No," I said. Beatrice stood up slowly. She was not the doting mother anymore. She was the matriarch whose authority was being challenged. She walked around the table until she was standing inches from me. She smelled of expensive perfume and rot. "Listen to me, Iris," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "We are doing this the nice way, but if you walk out that door without signing, I will make a call to Child Protective Services. I will tell them you are having hallucinations. I will tell them you are neglecting that baby. I will tell them you are suicidal." She poked a manicured finger into my chest. "Mr. Sterling here will testify that you were incoherent," she continued. "Chloe and Mark will testify. We will paint a picture of a woman so unstable that the state will take that boy away before you can blink. And with your history of difficulty conceiving, you will never get him back." The threat hung in the air, gross and absolute. She was weaponizing my deepest trauma. She was threatening to rip my son from my arms, knowing it would destroy me. For a second, I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her I knew about the forgery, about the loan sharks, about the fake lawyer. I wanted to flip the table and watch them scramble. But that was not the plan. The plan was total annihilation, not a momentary skirmish. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump again. I forced tears into my eyes. "Please don't," I whispered. "Please don't take him." "Then sign," Beatrice hissed. I can't do it right now," I sobbed, backing away toward the door. "I need to sleep. Just give me until tomorrow morning. Please, I will come back tomorrow at 9. I promise. Just let me say goodbye. Let me have one last night with him before I sign everything over." Beatrice exchanged a look with Mark. They needed the signature, but they also needed me compliant. If they pushed too hard and I ran to a real lawyer or the police today, their house of cards would fall. They figured I was broken. They figured I was cornered. "Tomorrow," Beatrice said. 9 o'clock sharp. If you are not here, I make the call." "I will be here," I said. I turned and stumbled toward the front door. As I passed the coffee table, I pretended to trip on the edge of the rug. My purse slipped off my shoulder, spilling keys and tissues onto the floor. "Clumsy," Chloe sneered. I knelt down to gather my things. "I am sorry," I mumbled. "I am sorry." While I was down there, obscured by the table and the scattering of my belongings, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small black device, a high-fidelity voice recorder with a 72-hour battery life. I stuck it to the underside of the heavy oak coffee table using the adhesive strip on its back. It was done. I stood up, clutching my purse to my chest. "I will see you tomorrow," I said. I walked out of the house. I did not look back. As I got into my car, I checked the camera feed on my phone one last time. "She is cracking," Beatrice was saying, pouring herself a drink. "We will have the signature by morning. Mark, tell your loan shark friends to wait 48 hours. I hope she does not do anything stupid." "Mister," Sterling said. "She is Iris," Chloe laughed. A cruel, sharp sound. "She never does anything stupid. She just does what she is told." I turned off the phone and started the engine. I drove down the winding road away from the lake, the rain hammering against the roof of my car. They were right. I used to do what I was told. But they had forgotten the most important rule of structural engineering: if you apply enough pressure to a foundation that wasn't built to hold it, the whole thing doesn't just crack, it explodes. And tomorrow, I was going to light the fuse. The blue light of my phone cut through the darkness of my bedroom at exactly 2:17 in the morning. I was not asleep. I had been lying awake, listening to the rhythm of Leo's breathing in the crib next to me, waiting for the inevitable escalation. The vibration of the phone against the nightstand sounded like a warning shot. Motion detected hallway. Zone 4. I picked up the phone and tapped the notification. The screen flooded with the monochrome gray of the night vision feed from the villa. The camera I had hidden in the smoke detector above the hallway was perfectly positioned to capture the door to my father's old study, a room I had kept locked for 10 years, using it to store his old files and some of my personal archives. On the screen, 2 ghostly figures were huddled by the door. Mark was wearing a t-shirt and boxers, holding a flathead screwdriver. Beatrice was behind him, clutching a flashlight, her silk robe pulled tight around her waist. She looked like a specter haunting her own home. "Quietly, you idiot," Beatrice's voice hissed through the speaker, tinny but audible. "If you wake the neighbors, I will kill you myself." "The lock is stuck," Mark grunted, jamming the screwdriver into the door frame. "Why did she lock this room anyway? It is just junk." "It is leverage," Beatrice snapped. "Richard kept everything in there, old tax returns, identification documents, bank records. If we are going to sell that land on Monday, we need more than just a forged signature. We need verification. We need something that proves I have the authority." There was a loud crack as the wood of the door frame splintered. I flinched, instinctively reaching out to cover Leo's ear. Even though the sound was miles away on a digital screen, the door swung open. "Get inside," Beatrice commanded. "Look for the filing cabinet. Top drawer." I switched the camera feed to the portable unit I had hidden on the bookshelf inside the study during my last visit. The room was dusty, filled with the shadows of my father's life. Mark began rifling through the drawers, tossing papers onto the floor with reckless abandon. "Here," Mark whispered triumphantly. He pulled out a small leather pouch. "Her passport. And, what is this?" He held up a heavy metal object. It was my old architectural stamp, the one I used when I first got licensed, along with a signature stamp I used for mass signing holiday cards years ago. "Let me see," Beatrice said. Snatching the passport, she shined the flashlight on it. "It expired 2 years ago, but the photo, she looks younger. It looks enough like me if I wear the right glasses and keep my head down. Or better yet, I can use it to validate the power of attorney. I tell the bank I have her ID because she is incapacitated." "Is that enough to access the emergency savings?" Mark asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It has to be," Beatrice said, pocketing the items. "We need $50,000 by noon tomorrow to pay off your friends. Then we get the big payout from the land sale on Monday. This is just a bridge loan. Mark, We are just borrowing it. Borrowing, Mark repeated, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. Right. I watched them leave. Stepping over the splintered wood of the doorframe, they were not just thieves. They were scavengers, picking through the bones of my identity to feed their own mistakes. I saved the video clip, categorized it under evidence_burglary, and set my alarm for 7 o'clock. The morning arrived with a gray, relentless drizzle. I did not go to the villa at 9 as I had promised. Instead, I sat in my kitchen, dressed in a sharp blazer and jeans, my laptop open, my phone connected to Arthur. She is moving, I told Arthur. Vance just texted me. Beatrice left the villa 10 minutes ago. She is driving the SUV. She is heading toward the main branch of First Pacific. The bank knows? Arthur asked. I spoke to the branch manager, Mr. Henderson, yesterday afternoon, I said, taking a sip of black coffee. I told him my wallet was stolen and that I suspected identity theft. I placed a verbal password on the account. Bluebird. If anyone tries to access the account without saying that word, even if they have my ID, it triggers a silent alarm. Good, Arthur said. Now we wait. At 10:15, my phone buzzed. It was an automated security alert from First Pacific Bank. Alert failed authentication attempt, counter 1, teller ID. JS. I closed my eyes and visualized the scene. I knew exactly how Beatrice would play it. She would walk in with her head held high, radiating the kind of old money confidence that usually made people hold doors open for her. She would be wearing her best suit, perhaps a pair of oversized sunglasses. She would present the forged power of attorney and my expired passport, claiming that her daughter was unwell and she needed to make an emergency withdrawal for medical expenses. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mr. Henderson. Miss Silverton, his voice was low and urgent. I am calling to confirm a woman is currently at window 3. She is claiming to be your mother, Beatrice Silverton, acting as your legal guardian. She is requesting a cashier's check for $50,000 from your high-yield savings account. Did she provide the code word? I asked. She did not. Mr. Henderson said, she provided a document that appears to be a power of attorney, and your passport. The passport is expired. My teller, Jennifer, is currently stalling her. She told her the system is updating and it will take a moment. We have notified security, and the silent alarm to the police has been triggered. Do you want us to detain her? I hesitated. This was the moment. I could end it right here. I could have my mother arrested on the floor of a bank, handcuffed in front of the mourning crowd. It would be swift justice. But it was too small. If she was arrested now, she would play the confused old lady. She would claim she didn't know the power of attorney wasn't valid yet, that she was just trying to help her sick daughter. She would cry. She might even get away with a warning. I needed the eviction. I needed the total dismantling of her sanctuary. No, I said. Do not detain her. Just decline the transaction. Tell her the signature on the power of attorney does not match the file. Spook her. Let her run. Are you sure? Mr. Henderson asked. She is committing fraud right in front of us. I have the video feed from my house proving she forged it, I said. I want her to leave the bank. I want her to go back to the villa empty-handed. I need her to be desperate when I arrive. Understood, Mr. Henderson said. I will instruct Jennifer. I stayed on the line, listening to the muffled sounds of the bank. I heard a distant voice, Beatrice's voice raising in pitch. What do you mean it does not match? That is ridiculous. I watched her sign it. Then, a pause. Ma'am, please lower your voice, a man's voice said. Security. We are having trouble verifying this document. We are going to need to call the notary listed here. I do not have time for this, Beatrice stammered. My daughter is in the hospital. This is outrageous. I am taking my business elsewhere. Ma'am, we need to keep the passport for verification. Give me that. There was a scuffle of movement, the sound of heels clicking rapidly against tile. And then the slam of a heavy door. She is gone. Mr. Henderson said, She snatched the passport and ran. We have her on the lobby cameras. We also scanned the documents she presented before she took them back. You have everything you need for a police report. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, I said. You have been very helpful. I hung up. My heart was pounding, a rhythmic drum against my ribs. She was running back to the villa now, terrified, empty-handed, and likely fielding calls from Mark's loan sharks. The pressure cooker was about to blow. I spent the next hour compiling the dossier. It was a digital mountain of evidence. Folder 1. The theft. The video of the break-in. The audio of them finding the passport. Folder 2. The fraud. The recording of the family meeting where they practiced my signature. The scan of the fake power of attorney Mr. Henderson had emailed me. Folder 3. The motive. The audio of Mark admitting to the $50,000 debt. The audio of Beatrice calling me an ATM machine. Folder 4. The residency. Vance's photos of them living in the house, violating the life estate. I copied everything onto 3 encrypted flash drives, one for Arthur, one for the police, and one for me. Then, I opened a blank document on my laptop. I stared at the blinking cursor. I had spent my whole life writing letters to my mother, thank you notes, birthday cards, apologies for things I hadn't done. This would be the last one. I typed the header, Notice of Resignation, to Beatrice Silverton. For 32 years, I have held the position of good daughter. I have performed my duties with diligence. I have provided financial support, emotional labor, and unconditional loyalty. I have absorbed your criticism, funded your lifestyle, and allowed you to rewrite the narrative of our family to suit your ego. However, recent events have brought to light a hostile work environment that is no longer sustainable. The compensation for this role your love was found to be counterfeit. The working conditions, constant manipulation, and theft are in violation of my basic human rights. Effective immediately. I am resigning. I am no longer your ATM. I am no longer your retirement plan. I am no longer the keeper of your secrets. I am taking back my name, my credit score, and the future you tried to sell to the highest bidder. Please consider this letter, and the sheriff's deputy standing behind me, as my final notice. Sincerely, Iris Silverton, landlord. I printed the letter on heavy, cream-colored cardstock. It felt solid in my hand. A physical object to end a psychological war. At noon, Arthur called. It is done, he said. His voice was grim but satisfied. I presented the evidence to Judge Hamilton an hour ago, given the imminent threat to your assets and the attempted identity theft at the bank. He granted an emergency ex parte order. Tell me, I said. We have a temporary restraining order barring Beatrice, Chloe, and Mark from coming within 100 yards of you, your son, or your financial institutions, and, crucially, we have a writ of possession. The judge voided the life estate based on the clear violation of the occupancy clause and the commission of a felony on the premises. So they are out. They are out, Arthur said. The sheriff's civil division is scheduling the lockout. I pulled some strings. They are meeting us there at 2 o'clock today. We are going in. Iris, 2 o'clock, I repeated. The same time Beatrice had demanded I return to sign away my life. I will be there with the deputies, Arthur said. You do not have to come inside if you do not want to. You can wait in the car. No, I said, looking at the sleeping face of my son. I need to be there. I need to open the door. It is my house. Arthur, I am done knocking. I packed the flash drives. I packed the letter. I packed a bag for Leo, ensuring I had enough formula and diapers in case the afternoon stretched long. I checked the camera feed one last time. Beatrice was back at the villa. She was pacing the living room, a glass of vodka in her hand. Mark was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. Chloe was screaming into her phone, presumably at the school that had just canceled the children's enrollment due to non-payment. They looked like rats on a sinking ship, snapping at each other as the water rose. I stood up and put on my coat. The fear was gone. The guilt was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard architecture of justice. Let's go. Leo, I whispered. picking up his carrier. "We are going to inspect a demolition site." The rain had stopped by the time I pulled up to the staging area a block away from the villa. It was 1:45 in the afternoon. Sitting in the unmarked sedan next to me was Arthur, looking less like a corporate lawyer and more like a general on the eve of battle. Behind us were two sheriff's patrol cars, engines idling quietly, but the real action was already happening inside the house. While Beatrice had been running her failed errand at the bank, Ross, the shady real estate agent, had been busy, desperate to close the deal before Mark's legs were broken by loan sharks. Ross had miraculously found a cash buyer willing to sign the papers immediately, sight unseen, and hand over a deposit check for $50,000 that very afternoon. Beatrice didn't know that the buyer, a man introduced as Mr. Cavell, was actually a retired forensic accountant named Frank, who owed Arthur a favor. I pulled up the camera feed on my tablet. The scene in the living room was almost Shakespearean in its hubris. Beatrice had recovered from her panic at the bank. She was back in her element, playing the gracious hostess. She had even set out a plate of store-bought cookies. Mr. Cavell sat on the sofa, looking bored and wealthy, tapping a gold pen against his knee. Ross was sweating through his suit, arranging a fan of documents on the coffee table. Chloe and Mark were hovering in the background like vultures. "So," Ross said, his voice trembling slightly with excitement, "Mr. Cavell has reviewed the property lines for the lower garden. He is satisfied. He is prepared to offer the full $800,000 in cash, with a $50,000 non-refundable deposit today." "Excellent," Beatrice beamed, smoothing her skirt. "We are so happy to find a buyer who appreciates the heritage of this land." "Heritage," Chloe whispered to Mark, snickering. "More like the ticket to a new Range Rover." "There is just the matter of the signature," Mr. Cavell said. His voice was gravelly and precise. "My lawyers are sticklers. The deed is in the name of Iris Silverton. You are Beatrice Silverton. You have the power of attorney." "I do," Beatrice said, not missing a beat. She pulled the forged document from her folder, the one she had practiced signing just yesterday. "My daughter is indisposed. As I mentioned, she is suffering from severe mental health issues. I am handling her affairs to ensure she is cared for. And she is aware of this sale." Mr. Cavell asked, leading the witness. "Oh, fully," Beatrice lied, her face a mask of maternal concern. "She wants this. She needs the money for her treatment." I watched from the car, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. She was selling my land to pay for my treatment in a facility she intended to lock me in. The layers of betrayal were so dense they were almost suffocating. "Very well, Mr. Cavell said. He pushed a document across the table. "This is the grant deed transferring the lower parcel to my holding company. Please sign here, as Iris Silverton, by Beatrice Silverton, attorney in fact." Ross interjected, eager to skip the formalities. "Actually, since the power of attorney hasn't been fully recorded with the county yet, due to the weekend, it might be cleaner if you just signed as Iris. We can notarize it later. It speeds up the funding." Beatrice hesitated for a fraction of a second. Signing as attorney in fact was fraud if the POA was fake. Signing as Iris was straight-up identity theft and forgery. But the $50,000 check was sitting right there on the table, a tantalizing rectangle of freedom. "Fine," Beatrice said. "I have signed for her 1,000 times. She won't mind." She picked up the pen. The room went silent. I watched on the screen as the pen tip touched the paper. She moved her hand with fluid confidence, tracing the loops and curves of my name. Iris Silverton. She finished with a flourish and set the pen down. "Done," she announced. "The land is yours, Mr. Cavell. And here's the deposit," Mr. Cavell said, sliding the check toward her. Beatrice reached for it, her eyes lighting up with greed. Mark pumped his fist in the background. Chloe let out a squeal of delight. "Now," I said to Arthur. Arthur signaled the deputies. We exited the vehicles. The sound of car doors slamming echoed in the quiet street. We marched up the driveway. A phalanx of justice. I reached the front door first. I didn't knock. I used my key, the key to the house I owned, and threw the door open. The sound of the heavy oak door hitting the wall was like a gunshot. "Nobody move," Arthur shouted, his voice booming. The scene in the living room froze. Beatrice was halfway to picking up the check. Ross dropped his briefcase. Mark looked like he was about to vomit. Beatrice spun around, her face pale. When she saw me, her eyes widened in genuine confusion. "Iris?" she stammered. You are early? We said 2 o'clock. And who are these people?" I stepped into the room. I was not the slumped, broken woman from yesterday. I was standing tall, my head high, looking at them with the cold clarity of a judge passing sentence. "These people," I said, pointing to the uniformed officers behind me, "are here to witness the sale, Mom, or should I say, the theft." "Iris, what is going on?" Chloe shrieked, stepping forward. "Why did you bring the police? Are you having another episode?" "Shut up, Chloe," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a razor. I walked over to the coffee table. "Mister?" Cavil Frank stood up and gave me a respectful nod. He picked up the document Beatrice had just signed. "You saw it?" Arthur asked him. "I did," Frank said. She signed the name Iris Silverton with the intent to transfer real property. She accepted a financial instrument in exchange. The transaction is complete. "That is a lie," Beatrice screamed, her composure shattering. She lunged for the table, trying to grab the paper. "Give me that! It was a mistake, I was just practicing." A deputy stepped forward and intercepted her, grabbing her wrist. "Ma'am, step back." "Get off me!" Beatrice yelled. "This is my house. You cannot come in here, Ross. Tell them we have a deal." Ross was backing away toward the patio door, looking for an exit. I did not know," he stammered. "She told me she had authorization. I am just the broker." "You are an accomplice, Ross," Arthur said, stepping into his path. "We have audio of you advising her to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit grand larceny. I believe that is a felony in this state." "And you?" I said, turning to Mark. "We have the footage of you breaking into my father's study, burglary, and the bank knows about the attempt to access my savings this morning. Attempted wire fraud." Mark sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "It is over," he moaned. "The loan sharks are going to kill me." "The loan sharks are the least of your problems," I said. Beatrice was panting, her chest heaving. She looked from the check to me, then to the police. Her eyes narrowed. She decided to play her last card. "You ungrateful brat," she spat at me. "I did this for you. You are sick. You are mentally unstable. I was trying to save the family." "Save the family." I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "You were trying to sell my land to pay off Mark's gambling debts. You were planning to put me in an asylum and throw my son into foster care. I heard every word, Mom, every single word." I pointed to the underside of the coffee table. "Check under the table. Deputy." The deputy knelt down and peeled off the black voice recorder I had planted. He held it up in a plastic evidence bag. Beatrice's face went the color of old ash. "You wiretapped us," Chloe gasped. "That is illegal." "Actually," Arthur interjected smoothly, "since Iris is the sole owner of this property and you are legally trespassing guests, she has the right to install security devices in her own home, and since she is a party to the conversation via the remote feed she was monitoring, it is admissible." "Trespassing," Beatrice whispered. "I have a life estate. Richard gave me this house for life." "He gave it to you with conditions," I said, pulling the life estate agreement from my bag. Condition 1. No extended family living here. You moved Chloe, Mark, and the kids in 3 years ago. Condition 2. No criminal activity on the premises. You just committed forgery and fraud right here on this coffee table. The life estate is void. Mom, you are evicted." "No." Beatrice shook her head, tears finally streaming down her face. Not tears of sorrow, but of rage. "You cannot do this. I am your mother, they are your sister and nephews. They are real family." "Real family protects each other," I said, echoing the thought that had kept me going. "Real family does not steal. Real family does not threaten to take a woman's child away." The sheriff stepped forward. "Beatrice Silverton, you are under arrest for forgery, fraud, and identity theft." "Mark Daniels, you are under arrest for burglary and conspiracy." As the deputy clicked the handcuffs onto Beatrice's wrists, she let out a wail that sounded like an animal caught in a trap. It was a sound of pure, undiluted narcissism being crushed. "Iris," she screamed as they led her toward the door. "Iris, stop this. Think about what people will say. Think about the scandal." "I am thinking about it," I said calmly. "And I think the truth will be very refreshing." Chloe was standing in the corner, clutching her children's photos on the mantelpiece, sobbing. "What about us?" she wailed. "Where are we supposed to go? We have no money. You are making us homeless." "You have a car," I said, looking at the keys to the Range Rover on the counter. "I suggest you pack what you can fit in it. The locks are being changed in 1 hour." "You are a monster," Chloe screamed. "You ganged up on your own mother. You set a trap." "I did not set a trap, Chloe," I said, walking over to the window to watch the police car lights flashing against the wet pavement. "I just stopped disarming the one you built for yourselves." Ross was being led out in cuffs as well, blubbering about his license. "Mr. Cavill." Frank shook my hand. "A pleasure doing business with you, Ms. Silverton," Frank said with a wink, "though I think I will keep my deposit check." "Please do," I said. The room cleared out slowly. The deputies took statements. The locksmith arrived and started drilling out the front door cylinder. I stood alone in the center of the living room. It was quiet. The oppressive energy of my mother's presence was gone, replaced by the sterile silence of a crime scene. I looked at the coffee table. The forged deed was still there, sitting next to the plate of cheap cookies. I picked it up. Iris Silverton. It looked so much like my signature, yet it lacked the force, the certainty of my own hand. It was a ghost trying to be a person. "This is my house," I whispered to the empty room. I walked over to the fireplace and picked up the lighter Beatrice used for her vanilla candles. I held the flame to the corner of the forged deed. I watched the paper curl and blacken, the fire eating my stolen name until there was nothing left but ash. "And you just sold it to me," I finished. I dropped the ashes into the cold fireplace. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the nanny. "Leo just woke up. He is smiling." I smiled back. For the first time in days, the demolition was complete. The debris was being hauled away. Now, finally, I could start to build something real. The courtroom in the King County Superior Court was a study in sterile intimidation. It was a windowless box of polished oak and fluorescent lighting, designed to strip away the messy emotions of life and leave only the cold, hard bones of the law. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Arthur Pendleton. I wore a tailored cream suit, my hair pulled back in a severe professional bun. I looked like what I was a successful architect, a woman of structure and discipline, across the aisle, at the defense table. My family looked like a painting of a tragedy that had been left out in the rain. Beatrice was out on bail, thanks to a property bond put up by a distant cousin who clearly did not know the full story. She was dressed in a cardigan that was 2 sizes too big and a shade of gray that washed out her complexion. It was a costume. She was playing the role of the confused, frail grandmother, the victim of a misunderstanding. Chloe sat behind her, chewing her fingernails, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Mark was absent, likely being held in a separate holding cell due to his inability to post bail on the burglary charge. The hearing was a hybrid proceeding, a consolidated scheduling to address the temporary restraining order, the civil suit for damages, and the preliminary evidentiary hearing for the fraud charges. Judge Hamilton presided. He was a man with a face like a topographic map, etched with lines of skepticism. Beatrice's lawyer, a court-appointed defender named Mr. Thorne, stood up to make his opening statement. He was a young man with an ill-fitting suit and a weary expression. He knew he had a bad hand, but he was determined to bluff. "Your Honor," Mr. Thorne began, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "We are looking at a tragic family dispute, not a criminal enterprise. My client, Beatrice Silverton, is a grieving widow who has dedicated her life to raising her children. Yes, mistakes were made regarding paperwork. Yes, signatures were perhaps rushed in moments of panic. But these were the actions of a desperate mother trying to save her family from financial ruin. Not a mastermind thief." He paused, walking toward the jury box. Though there was no jury today, only the judge. He turned his gaze toward me. "And why was she desperate?" Thorne continued, his voice hardening. "Because her daughter, the plaintiff, Iris Silverton, abruptly and cruelly cut off all financial support. She abandoned her mother and sister. She turned her back on her own flesh and blood to lavish her resources on a personal project." He gestured vaguely toward me, as if I were a piece of abstract art he didn't understand. "The plaintiff claims to be a mother," Thorne said, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "But she is not a mother in the biological sense. She has adopted a child, a noble act on paper, but she lacks the visceral, primal understanding of the bond that exists between blood relatives. She does not understand that a mother, a real mother like Beatrice, would do anything to feed her children. Iris Silverton sees a ledger. Beatrice Silverton sees survival. We asked the court to see the humanity here, not just the technicalities." I felt Arthur stiffen beside me, under the table, my hands clenched into fists. But my face remained a mask of porcelain calm. They were attacking my son again. They were using my infertility as a weapon to justify their larceny. It was vile, but it was also a mistake. Judge Hamilton did not look moved. He looked annoyed. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said, peering over his glasses, "are you suggesting that biology is a defense for forgery?" "I am suggesting it goes to intent, Your Honor." Thorne stammered. "There was no malice, only desperation." "Let us hear from the plaintiff," Judge Hamilton said, cutting him off. "Ms. Silverton, please take the stand." I walked to the witness box. The wood felt cool under my hand as I was sworn in. I sat down, adjusting the microphone. I looked directly at Beatrice. She refused to meet my eyes, staring obstinately at a stain on the table. Arthur stood up. "Ms. Silverton, can you please explain to the court your financial relationship with the defendant over the past decade?" "I can," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Since the death of my father 10 years ago, I have been the sole provider for my mother, Beatrice, and my sister, Chloe. I believed I was contributing to the family estate. I believed I was paying off my father's debts." "And did you bring documentation of this support?" Arthur asked. "I did." Arthur handed a thick binder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "Your Honor," I said, addressing the judge directly. "Tab A contains the banking records from the last 10 years. It details mortgage payments, utility bills, credit card payoffs, and direct cash transfers. I have categorized them by year and recipient." Judge Hamilton flipped open the binder. His eyebrows shot up. "And what is the total sum of these payments, Ms. Silverton?" Arthur asked. $2,045,612, I stated. A gasp rippled through the small gallery. Even Mr. Thorne looked down at his notes, visibly deflated. $2 million, Arthur repeated. "And was this money used for survival, as the defense claims?" "No," I said. Tab B details the specific charges: luxury vacations to Europe, designer clothing, private school tuition for my sister's children, high-end spa treatments, and recently, vintage wines and collector toys costing over $1,000 in a single afternoon. "So," Arthur said, pacing in front of the stand, "you provided $2 million in support, and when you stopped, what happened?" "My mother attempted to sell a portion of my land behind my back," I said. She forged my signature on a grant deed. She attempted to access my emergency savings using a fake power of attorney and my expired passport, and she conspired to have me institutionalized so she could seize control of my remaining assets. Objection, Thorne shouted. Speculation. I have the audio, Arthur said calmly. Exhibit C, Your Honor, the recording from the defendant's own living room, obtained via a security system installed by the owner of the property. Judge Hamilton waved his hand. Play it. The courtroom was silent as the audio file began. The quality was crisp. Beatrice's voice filled the room, stripped of its public veneer, revealing the ugly timbre of her true self. The girl used to be useful, but honestly, Iris is just an ATM machine, and now that she has that baby, the machine is broken. If she won't give us the cash, we have to dismantle the machine to get it. Then, Chloe's voice, sharp and cruel. The baby goes back to the agency, or foster care. It does not matter. He is not family. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Beatrice had turned a sickly shade of green. She was shrinking in her chair, physically withering under the weight of her own recorded malice. Judge Hamilton stared at the defense table for a long, uncomfortable minute. Mr. Thorne, the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet. You argued that your client acted out of love and desperation. That recording sounded a great deal like premeditated malice and greed. Do you have a medical expert who can testify to her? Confusion. Thorne stood up, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. We have submitted a preliminary evaluation suggesting stress-induced anxiety. I have read the evaluation, Judge Hamilton snapped. It states that Beatrice Silverton is fully oriented to time and place. She scores perfectly on cognitive tests. She is not confused. Counselor, she is calculating. The judge turned his eyes to the back of the room. Is Chloe Daniels present? Chloe froze. She stood up slowly, her legs shaking. Yes, Your Honor. Take the stand, the judge ordered. Chloe walked to the witness box as if she were walking to the gallows. She passed me, and for a split second, our eyes met. I saw nothing in hers but terror. She was not a mastermind. She was a follower who had suddenly realized the leader had walked her off a cliff. Mrs. Daniels, the prosecutor, a woman named Ms. Vance, who was handling the criminal side of the hearing, stepped forward. You are currently facing charges of conspiracy and trespassing. You are under oath. Whose idea was it to forge the power of attorney? Chloe looked at Beatrice. Beatrice glared back, her eyes wide and threatening. A silent command to keep her mouth shut, but the ship was sinking, and Chloe had no loyalty to anyone but herself. It was hers, Chloe whispered, pointing a trembling finger at our mother. Speak up, Judge Hamilton commanded. It was Mom. Chloe cried out, the dam breaking. It was all her idea. She told Mark to break into the study. She told us Iris was weak. She said Iris owed us the money. I did not want to do it. I just wanted to pay the tuition for Noah and Emma. She forced me. She forced you, the prosecutor asked. Did she hold a gun to your head? She controls everything. Chloe sobbed, her face blotchy and red. She told me if I did not help her, she would kick me out of the house. She said Iris was going to abandon us anyway. She said we had to take what was ours before Iris gave it all to that baby. So you admit you knew the house belonged to Iris? The prosecutor asked. Yes, Chloe wept. We knew. Mom told us years ago, but she said it did not matter because she could manipulate Iris. She called her the golden goose. She said we just had to keep plucking the feathers. Beatrice slammed her hand on the table. You lying little traitor, she shrieked. I gave you everything. I bought your clothes. I raised your children. How dare you? Order. Judge Hamilton banged his gavel, the sound cracking like a whip. One more outburst, Ms. Silverton, and I will revoke your bail and have you remanded immediately. Beatrice slumped back, defeated. The facade of the loving matriarch had been completely stripped away. leaving only a bitter, greedy old woman exposed to the harsh fluorescent light. I sat perfectly still. I did not smile. I did not frown. I watched the scene with the detachment of an architect watching a controlled demolition. The structure was unsound. It had to come down. The dust was choking. But the collapse was necessary. Judge Hamilton spent 10 minutes reviewing his notes. The scratching of his pen was the only sound in the room. Finally, he looked up. "I have heard enough for the preliminary orders," he said. "The evidence presented by the plaintiff is overwhelming. The audio recordings, the video surveillance, and the testimony of the co-conspirator, Mrs. Daniels, paint a clear picture of systemic fraud and abuse." He looked at Beatrice. "Beatrice Silverton. This court finds that there is probable cause to bind you over for trial on all charges. Furthermore, regarding the civil matters and the estate of Richard Silverton, I am issuing the following orders effective immediately." He adjusted his glasses. "First, the temporary restraining order is made permanent for a duration of 5 years. You are to have no contact with Iris Silverton or the minor child. Leo Silverton, you are to stay 500 yards away from their residence and place of employment. Second," the judge continued, "I am issuing a global asset freeze on all accounts held by Beatrice Silverton and Chloe Daniels to preserve funds for restitution. The plaintiff has demonstrated a loss of over $2 million. We will be holding a separate hearing to determine the liquidation of assets to repay the plaintiff. Third, and most importantly," Judge Hamilton leaned forward, "this court finds that by committing felony fraud against the estate and the heir, Beatrice Silverton has violated her fiduciary duties and the terms of the life estate granted by her late husband. The life estate is hereby terminated. The property at 105 Lakeview Drive reverts to the sole possession of Iris Silverton, effective immediately. I am issuing a writ of assistance," the judge concluded. "The sheriff is authorized to remove any remaining occupants and personal property belonging to the defendants from the premises within 24 hours. If you step foot on that property after tomorrow at noon, you will be arrested for trespassing." "Your Honor," Thorne tried to intervene, "my client has nowhere to go. She is 60 years old." "She has committed grand larceny," Judge Hamilton said coldly. "She can find a motel, or she can ask the daughter she conspired with for a place to sleep, but she will not sleep in the house she tried to steal. Court is adjourned." The gavel banged. I stood up. Arthur gathered the files. "Good work, Iris," Arthur said quietly. "You held it together." "It is done," I said. I turned to leave. I had to pass the defense table to get to the exit. Beatrice was sitting there, staring at the empty space where her future used to be. Chloe was sobbing into her hands. As I walked by, Beatrice looked up. Her eyes were red, filled with a mixture of hatred and shock. "He was my husband," she hissed at me. "It was my house." I stopped. I looked down at her, seeing her not as a monster, but as something small and pathetic. "He was your husband," I said softly, "but he was my father, and he knew you better than anyone. That is why he gave the key to me." I walked out of the courtroom doors and into the hallway. The air was cooler out here, fresher. I checked my phone. There was a photo from Mrs. Higgins. Leo was sitting in his high chair, his face covered in mashed sweet potatoes, grinning a gummy, toothless smile. That was my reality. That was my truth. Behind me, the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom swung shut, sealing the toxicity inside. I did not look back. I had a house to reclaim. And for the first time in my life, I had a home that was truly mine. The deadline set by Judge Hamilton was noon on Tuesday. I arrived at 11:30, accompanied not by family, but by a team of sheriff's deputies and a rigid enforcement officer named Lieutenant Graves. The sky was a slate gray, offering a grim backdrop to the final act of this dismantling. I parked my car at the curb, refusing to pull into the driveway. That space was for the movers, or rather, the removalists. The writ of assistance and the asset freeze order were specific. Because my mother and sister had financed their lives through fraud and embezzlement of my funds. The court had ruled that any high-value assets purchased in the last 5 years were subject to seizure for restitution. They were allowed to leave with their clothing, their toiletries, and necessary personal documents. Everything else, the electronics, the designer furniture, the art, and the jewelry bought with my credit cards, was to remain behind to be cataloged and liquidated. I watched from the sidewalk as the deputies pounded on the door. It opened to reveal Chloe, her face puffy from days of crying. Behind her, the hallway was chaos. Cardboard boxes were stacked haphazardly, bursting with clothes. "Time is up," Lieutenant Graves said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "You need to vacate the premises immediately." "We are not ready," Chloe wailed, clutching a Louis Vuitton handbag. "We have nowhere to go. The car is too small." "That is not my problem, ma'am," Graves said. He pointed to the handbag. "Is that bag listed on the exemption sheet?" "It is my purse," Chloe screamed. "It was purchased in June of last year," I spoke up, checking the inventory list Arthur had prepared. "Using the American Express card ending in 3098, cost $3,200. It stays." Chloe looked at me with pure hatred. "You are stripping the clothes off our backs." "You can take the contents," I said calmly. "Put your lipstick and your wallet in a plastic bag. The purse stays." For the next hour, I stood by the door like a sentinel. It was a brutal, ugly process. I watched as my mother, Beatrice, walked out of her bedroom carrying a jewelry box. "Put it down," I said. "These are family heirlooms," she hissed, clutching it to her chest. "The heirlooms from Grandma are in the safe deposit box," I corrected her. "That box contains the diamond tennis bracelet you bought last Christmas and the sapphire earrings you bought for Chloe's birthday. Put it down." Beatrice trembled, her knuckles white. For a moment, I thought she might throw the box at me. Instead, she set it on the entry table with a slam that cracked the wood. "I hope you rot in hell, Iris," she whispered. "I am already in the hell you built." "Mom," I said, "I am just evicting the devils." The most striking image of the afternoon came when Mark tried to carry out the boxes containing the German electric train sets, the same $500 toys that had started this entire war. He was struggling with the weight of them, sweating profusely. "Leave them," a deputy ordered. "These are for my kids," Mark argued. "They are toys. They are assets valued at over $500 purchased with stolen funds," the deputy recited from the court order. "They stay." Mark dropped the boxes. One of them hit the floor hard, the cardboard tearing. I could see the gleaming metal of the locomotive inside. It sat there on the expensive Persian rug, which also had to stay looking ridiculous and small. A $500 bribe for affection that was now just evidence in a fraud case. By 12:15, they were on the curb. Their possessions were reduced to black garbage bags filled with clothes and a few boxes of cheap knickknacks. The Range Rover was packed so full that the rear suspension was sagging. Beatrice, Chloe, Mark, and the 2 children stood in the drizzle, looking back at the house that had been their fortress. My phone buzzed. It was Beatrice. I looked through the window. She was staring right at me, holding her phone to her ear, rain matting her hair to her forehead. I answered. "Iris," she said, her voice cracking. "Please, look at us. We are out on the street. Noah is crying. Emma is cold. How can you do this? We are your family." I watched her through the glass. She looked small. She looked old. But even now, she was trying to manipulate me. She was using the children as human shields. "You have a car, Mom," I said. "You have friends at the country club. Go ask them for help." "They won't take my calls," she sobbed. "Everyone knows about the arrest. They have all turned their backs on me. You are the only one left. We are the real family. Remember, blood is thicker than water." "You are right," I said. "Blood is thicker than water, and you made your choice about whose blood mattered. You chose Chloe. You chose Mark. You chose the grandchildren who looked like you. I made a mistake, she pleaded. I am sorry. Just let us stay in the guest house, just for a week. Please, Iris, I held you when you were a baby. And you refused to hold mine, I said. The memory of the party, of her revulsion toward Leo, steeled my heart. You have your real family out there on the curb with you. Mom, Chloe is there. Mark is there. The grandchildren you love so much are there. Let them support you. Let them be the ones to save you. They have nothing, she screamed. Then you better start teaching them how to work, I said. Goodbye. Beatrice. I hung up. I watched as she stared at the phone, then screamed something at the closed window. She banged on the hood of the car, then finally, defeated, climbed into the passenger seat. The Range Rover pulled away, sputtering slightly, disappearing down the wet street. I turned away from the window. The house was silent. It was mine, but it felt contaminated. The air smelled of Beatrice's cloying perfume and Mark's stale cologne. The walls felt like they had absorbed 10 years of lies. I called the cleaning service I had booked. You can come now, I said. I want the deep clean package, industrial strength. If it can be scrubbed, scrub it. If it can be bleached, bleach it. For the next 3 days, a team of 6 people in hazmat-style suits descended on the villa. They steam-cleaned the carpets until the water ran black. They scoured the bathrooms. They washed the walls. I had them remove every piece of furniture that Beatrice had purchased. I sold it all to a liquidator for pennies on the dollar, just to get it out of my sight. The money went into a trust account for Leo. While the house was being purged, the legal system continued to grind my family into dust. Mark was the first to fall completely. The police investigation into the burglary had opened a Pandora's box regarding his finances. It turned out the loan sharks he owed were not just neighborhood thugs, but part of a larger organized crime ring the FBI had been tracking. His involvement with them, combined with the wire fraud he attempted at my bank, led to federal charges. He was denied bail. The last I heard, he was negotiating a plea deal that would see him serve 5 to 7 years in a federal penitentiary. Beatrice's fate was less dramatic, but perhaps more humiliating. Her lawyer managed to plead down the grand larceny charges to avoid a lengthy prison sentence, citing her age and lack of prior criminal record. But the judge was merciless in the sentencing. She was given 5 years of probation. She was ordered to pay restitution of $200,000, a sum she did not have, which meant her wages would be garnished for the rest of her life. But the kicker was the community service. Judge Hamilton ordered her to perform 2,000 hours of service. The woman who had once turned up her nose at waiters and cleaners was now assigned to a roadside cleanup crew. A friend sent me a photo a few weeks later. It showed Beatrice wearing a bright orange safety vest, holding a trash picker, collecting litter along the I-5 highway. She looked miserable. The humiliation was total. The country club revoked her membership. Her friends treated her like a leper. She was forced to move into a 1-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex near the airport, sharing it with Chloe and the kids. They were living the life they had always looked down on, and they were doing it without my credit card to cushion the blow. I did not visit them. I did not send money. I simply blocked their numbers and moved on. A week after the eviction, I walked into the villa alone. The cleaners had finished. The house smelled of lemon and antiseptic. It was empty, echoing, and clean. I had changed the locks myself. I had installed a new biometric security system. This was a fortress now, but it needed to become a home. I walked through the empty rooms, planning the renovations. I would tear down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room to let the light in. I would repaint the suffocating beige walls a crisp, bright white. I would turn Chloe's old room into a playroom for Leo. I made my way to the garage. This was the one place the cleaners hadn't touched yet. At my request, it was piled high with junk that Beatrice had banished from the main house years ago. I started sifting through the boxes. There were old holiday decorations, broken appliances, and piles of mildewed magazines, but in the back corner, shoved under a tarp, I found a wooden crate marked Richard. My heart hammered in my chest. I pulled the tarp away. Inside was my father's old leather reading chair. The leather was cracked and dusty, but it was still his. Next to it was a box of his favorite books, hardcover editions of sci-fi novels and engineering textbooks, and at the bottom, wrapped in a flannel shirt, was a framed photograph. I wiped the dust off the glass. It was a picture of me and my dad on a fishing trip when I was 10. We were both laughing, holding up a tiny fish. Beatrice hated that photo. She said it was undignified and messy. She had banished it to the garage the week after his funeral. I sat down in his old leather chair right there in the garage. It squeaked in that familiar way. I hugged the photo to my chest and finally, for the first time since the ordeal began, I cried. I didn't cry for the mother I lost, because I realized I never really had her. I cried for the father who had tried to protect me, even from the grave. He had known. He had left me the house, the key, the means to save myself. He had hidden his love in legal clauses and safety deposit boxes, waiting for me to be strong enough to find it. I found it, Dad, I whispered to the dusty air. I got the house back. I spent the rest of the afternoon carrying his things back into the main house. I placed his chair in the center of the living room, facing the window that overlooked the lake. I put his books on the mantelpiece, replacing the pretentious porcelain statues Beatrice had loved. I hung the photo of us fishing right in the entryway, where it would be the first thing anyone saw, as the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the water. I picked up Leo from his carrier. I sat in my father's chair, holding my son. "This is your grandpa's chair," I told Leo, bouncing him on my knee. He was a good man, he built things, and he made sure we would be safe. The house was quiet, but it was no longer empty. It was filled with the memory of the one person who had actually loved me, and the promise of the future I was building for the person I loved most. My phone buzzed on the floor. I ignored it. I knew who it wasn't. It wasn't Beatrice. It wasn't Chloe. They were part of a past I had successfully demolished. I looked around the room. There was no furniture yet. Just me, the baby, and the chair. But as I looked at the clean walls and the sturdy beams, I knew one thing for sure. The foundation was solid. The rot was gone. And for the first time in 10 years, the air in the villa was breathable. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I opened a bottle of wine, not the expensive vintage Beatrice would have bought, but a simple red I liked. I poured a glass and toasted the empty room. "To the real family," I said aloud. "The one you choose, and the one you protect." The silence of the house answered me, and it sounded like peace. 6 months have passed since the gavel fell in Judge Hamilton's courtroom, and if you were to walk into the villa on Lake Union today, you would not recognize it. The oppressive beige walls that Beatrice loved so much are gone, replaced by a soft, warm white that catches the reflection of the water outside. The wall that used to separate the kitchen from the living room, the wall that allowed secrets to fester in the dark, has been knocked down. Now, the entire ground floor is an open concept, flooded with natural light, smelling of sea salt and, on this particular Saturday afternoon, vanilla buttercream frosting. It was Leo's first birthday. I stood in the center of the living room, holding a glass of sparkling cider, watching the chaos unfold. It was a good kind of chaos. There were no stiff postures, no whispered judgments, no performance of wealth. There were just people. Arthur Pendleton was sitting on the rug, my father's favorite Persian rug that we had saved from the asset seizure building a tower of blocks with Leo. The ruthless corporate litigator who had decimated my mother in court was currently making airplane noises to make a 1-year-old laugh. Mrs. Higgins, the nanny who had guarded my door like a Cerberus, was in the kitchen laughing with 2 of my colleagues from Vanguard Horizons. Frank, the retired forensic accountant, who had posed as the buyer to entrap Beatrice, had stopped by earlier to drop off a gift, a savings bond for Leo's college fund. This was the family I had built. It was not bound by DNA or obligation. It was bound by loyalty, respect, and the shared understanding that love is a verb, not a transaction. He looks happy, Arthur said, standing up and dusting off his suit knees as he walked over to me. Leo, though I suppose you look decent too. For a landlord. I laughed, a sound that felt easy in my throat. I feel happy. Arthur, it is strange. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. I keep waiting for the phone to ring with a crisis. The crisis is currently stocking shelves at a discount grocery store in Renton, Arthur said, his voice lowering to a professional rumble. I got the update from the probation officer this morning. I took a sip of my cider, looking out at the lake. Tell me. Beatrice is working 30 hours a week as a cashier, Arthur said. It is part of her community service requirement, but she also needs the income because the garnishment on her Social Security is hitting hard. She is living in a studio apartment. Chloe and the kids moved out last month. Where did Chloe go? I asked. She moved in with a new boyfriend she met online, Arthur said with a cynical smirk. Apparently, he has a jet ski and a lease on a condo in Bellevue. She is repeating the cycle, but Mark won't be joining them. The federal judge sentenced him to 6 years. He reports to the minimum security facility in Sheridan next week. Chloe filed for divorce 3 days after the sentencing. I nodded slowly. I expected to feel a surge of triumph, a vindictive thrill at knowing the people who had tormented me were suffering, but I did not feel triumph. I felt a profound, quiet relief. It was the feeling of recovering from a long illness. You do not hate the fever when it breaks. You just embrace the cool air. And the restitution, I asked. We received the first check from the court clerk yesterday, Arthur said. It is small, $500. It will take her 100 years to pay back the $2 million. But the point isn't the money. Iris, it is the reminder. Every month, she has to write that check. Every month, she has to remember why she's writing it. I don't want the money, I said. I never did. I know, Arthur said gently. That is why you are going to do something good with it. He was right. I had spent a lot of time thinking about the inheritance my father had left me, not just the house, but the lesson. He had tried to protect me with legal structures because he knew he wouldn't be there to protect me in person. There were so many others out there, elderly parents, single mothers, trusting siblings who were being bled dry by the people who were supposed to love them, but who didn't have the resources to hire an Arthur Pendleton. I signed the papers for the foundation this morning, I told him. The Richard Silverton Legal Defense Fund. We are going to use the restitution payments, plus a percentage of my own income, to provide legal grants for victims of familial financial abuse. We will help them pay for forensic accountants, for restraining orders, for eviction notices. We are going to give them the keys to their own lives back. Arthur clinked his glass against mine. Your father would be proud. He was an engineer. Iris, he liked fixing things. You are fixing the system. I am just reinforcing the structure, I corrected him. Using the language of my trade, a squeal of delight drew my attention back to the center of the room. Leo had managed to plunge his entire hand into his smash cake. He was covered in blue frosting, his dark hair sticking up in every direction. His eyes wide with the sheer, unadulterated joy of sugar. I walked over and scooped him up, ignoring the mess he made on my silk blouse. He giggled, smearing frosting on my cheek. Happy birthday, my love, I whispered into his hair. I carried him toward the large bay window that overlooked the garden. The lower garden, the one Beatrice had tried to sell for $800,000, was now a riot of wildflowers. I had hired a landscaper to tear out the manicured, pretentious hedges Beatrice had favored and replace them with native plants, ferns, lupines, and wild roses. It was wilder, less controlled, but infinitely more alive. As I looked at the garden, a memory washed over me. It was a flashback, sharp and vivid, from a time before the sickness of greed had fully taken over my family. I was 22, sitting in this very room, crying over a breakup with a college boyfriend who had told me I was too serious, too focused on my career. My father had walked in. He didn't offer me ice cream or empty platitudes. He had sat in his leather chair, the one that now sat proudly by the fireplace. and looked me in the eye. "Iris," he had said, his voice gravelly and kind, "you are crying because you think you owe him your happiness. You think you owe people pieces of yourself just because they ask for them. But listen to me. You do not owe anyone your life, not a boyfriend, not a boss, not even your family. You build your own walls, and you put in your own doors. You decide who comes in, and you have the right to lock them out." I hadn't understood him then. I thought he was being cold. Now, holding my son in the house he saved for me, I understood that it was the warmest thing he could have ever said. I looked down at Leo. He was staring at the window, mesmerized by a hummingbird hovering near the glass. "Did you hear that, Leo?" I murmured to him. "You do not owe anyone your life, not even me. You are free." I turned away from the window and walked to the mantelpiece. There, sitting next to the urn containing my father's ashes, was a small, hand-carved wooden box. I had bought it from an artisan at the Pike Place market the day the eviction was finalized. I shifted Leo to my hip and opened the box with one hand. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, was a single iron key. It was the old key to the front door, the key Beatrice had used for 10 years, the key that had allowed her to walk in and out of my life, taking what she wanted, leaving only guilt behind. I had kept it not as a souvenir, but as a symbol. I looked at Leo. "People will tell you that family is blood," I told him quietly, though he was more interested in the frosting on his fingers. "They will tell you that you have to forgive people because you share a last name. They will tell you that boundaries are selfish, but they are wrong." I picked up the key. It felt cold and heavy. "Blood does not make a family." I whispered the phrase I had read in a poem once. "Blood does not make a family. Love and protection make a family. Respect makes a family. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is lock the door." I dropped the key back into the box and closed the lid with a definitive snap. It was a coffin for a life I no longer lived. I turned back to the party. The room was filled with golden light. Mrs. Higgins was bringing out the main cake for the guests. Arthur was arguing good-naturedly with Frank about baseball. It was warm, it was safe, it was mine. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated. The old instinct, the conditioned response of a decade of trauma, flared up for a second. What if it is an emergency? What if she needs me? I pulled the phone out. It was an unknown number. No caller ID. I stared at the screen. I knew who it was. It was Beatrice. It was Tuesday, her day off from the grocery store. She was probably sitting in her small apartment, looking at old photos, drinking cheap wine, and feeling the urge to reach out and pull the strings she thought were still attached to me. She wanted to guilt me. She wanted to blame me. Or maybe she just wanted to hear my voice so she could feel like she still existed in my world. My thumb hovered over the green answer button. I looked at Leo. He was looking at me, his eyes bright and trusting. He deserved a mother who was whole. He deserved a mother who wasn't tethered to a ghost. I slid my thumb to the red button. Decline. Then, I went into the settings. I tapped block caller. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. It felt lighter. The vibration stopped. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of music and laughter and the clinking of forks on china. I walked back into the center of the room, holding my son high. "Who wants cake?" I asked. A cheer went up from the room. I laughed. And this time, the sound came from the very bottom of my soul, echoing off the walls of a house that finally, truly belonged to me. I was Iris Silverton. I was a mother. I was a survivor. And I was finally, wonderfully, free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know family struggles can be the hardest battles we ever fight, but I hope my journey reminds you that you have the right to protect your peace and your future. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment down below with your location and let me know what you would have done in my shoes. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Healing Drama Stories, like this video, and press the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, And remember, you are the architect of your own life.